All right, now we are to my favorite section, which is business supermodels. This is where we're going to take a business idea and break it down. Today we're focusing on the medical industry, and before we get started, there's really three different kinds of businesses that you can make in the medical industry. That is developing a medicine, or developing a device, or developing a service like a healthcare provider, a home where you go to live, or some sort of service where the nurse comes to the house and visits. Those are kind of businesses that are services. Before we get started into the basic breakdown, which is generally consistent, educate, establish, develop, and then market, deliver, and follow up. But with the medical industry, it's a little bit different than other businesses, so there's a few preliminary details that you might want to mention. Research, market, niche. So in the medical industry, there is literally thousands of ways that the body can be served. Tests, solutions, cures, support. And so you want to make sure that you research your niche, how are services currently being provided. It's sort of like a competitive analysis and a customer analysis at the same time. But it's not as competitive because there's always only going to be the best treatment. And so most doctors are going to pick that. So it's not about beating out your competition based on opinion. It's about being the best solution. So you really got to focus on the mission much more than the image of the company. And that's also true for websites and social media. These sort of companies are often known to do what's called going dark. So they'll have a website, but it won't be terribly informative, and it won't be there to market their product. That's not their primary intention. And remember, this is mostly business to business, so the marketing takes place much more face-to-face. So the second principle of a medical business that's a little bit more specific than general business models is the necessity to network. So you just need to network. It's actually a basic principle of business-to-business marketing, but in this instance, it just needs to be reset again because they're not going to find out about your product in the traditional way. So aside from finding the right doctors to support you and doing your networking properly, you want to choose the right investor. So there's a lot of guys who will have a lot of money and think your idea is great and let's throw some money at it, but can they help you network? Do they have any sort of expertise? Do they have an understanding of how long this is going to take? Are they going to give you breathing room as a founder to develop your idea properly, or are they going to crunch down and try to get you to turn out a product as soon as possible, which, by the way, could land you in jail. So you really got to be careful about that. If it doesn't work, you be careful about your claims. Look at what Theranos did. It's a classic example. So there's another truth, which is the medical responsibility of your company. So doctors are required to take a Hippocratic oath, which says that I will provide medical service to whoever needs it at any time, which is why if you see somebody having a heart attack in the hospital, you're always going to see if there's a doctor available, they feel obligated to jump in and handle it because they've taken this oath. And who wants to watch somebody die when you know how to solve it? But the point is, as a medical providing company, doctors and people you work with are going to expect you to sort of honor the same sorts of commitment, because you're a health provider, but nobody wants to deal with an unethical health provider. So you have to buy into the mission of the industry, or at least be perceived to. And so you're going to have poor customers, you're going to have rural customers, you're going to want to think of a strategy to demonstrate that you're attempting to care for them as much as the moneyed customers that actually help you build your company. It's just an added requirement because you're dealing with health. So, and then the final point, which is more relevant, it's relevant to any industry, but it's especially relevant here, which is knowing your limitations. You might think you're setting out to cure cancer, but you might only come up with a good treatment for cancer. A classic example is these engineers from Stanford who we were just talking about, who came up with a solution for an N95 mask, or at least they think they did. Well, they don't necessarily understand their limitations, because if you think that nuclear fission is going to be invented and implemented on behalf of an N95 mask, you truly don't understand that parallel industry, because there's a lot of people waiting for it. The entire hydrogen-based economy is just waiting for a proper fission process to take place. So, obviously these guys have jumped into very deep water. No, that's not to say that their second solution won't yield results, or even, who knows? Maybe one night in the garage they stumble across the answer. I dare say if they invent nuclear fission in their garage one evening, they might not live to tell about it, but who knows? So let's jump into the breakdown. If you're going to create a medical device or a medicine business, you want to educate yourself about customers and competitors, of course. You want to know who's doing it and who's receiving it. Probably you're going to want to also focus on the nature of the industry. So with medicine, of course, there's a lot of research and information that needs to be learned. It's a very information-intensive business. And so you're going to want to educate yourself about practices, about the health systems that you're attempting to affect, how the body works. So you might want to be somewhat of a competent scientist on some level, science student on some level. And then you want to also know the people who you might want to be networking to. So, who are the doctors that you might, make your initial pitch to. Maybe just focus on a specific state. Like, I'm going to focus on all of the doctors in Illinois. And when I get to the end of that rotation, I'm just going to start over and I'm going to keep on hammering home on one state. Obviously, you would like to reach out to every doctor possible, but it's a little bit more manageable if you sequester your efforts. So beyond that, you want to establish yourself. So you're probably going to want to have a good lawyer for this because you're making a long-term research project, and there's going to be a lot of information you want to protect. You're going to want to document your progress as you make it with time-stamped information. This is the way that you can, prove that, your research, just in case at the time of when you unveil your product or service, you don't have somebody else coming up and saying, I did that first, I have the rights to this first. You can demonstrate your research, demonstrate where you got it from, demonstrate that you didn't steal it from them, and when, and what you did and when. In the development process, time stamping is important. So beyond that, in the medical industry, your website is not going to be as important, but you still want to have one. It could just say, we're doing this. This is who we are as a company. It doesn't have to necessarily be so detailed. The finer points of your research obviously are confidential, usually, and your social media to some extent. At least have a way to be contacted as a company or as a leader. Probably your identity as a leader is important because you're dealing with long-term funding. So it might help to develop your personal brand a little bit more than other devices, perhaps, because you're going to be in a relationship with these investors for probably some years. And that's a good thing. That's what you want. That's what you go into it expecting. This is truly a swing-for-the-fence industry, so there's going to be a lot of strikeouts, and those strikeouts might take years to develop as well. It's just painful that way. But, you're dealing with intelligent individuals who are monitoring the results every step of the way. So unless your team is defunct, you might have opportunities to pivot. So then, beyond establishing your identity in the traditional ways and the business-to-business ways, which is building your face-to-face contact list, you want to, you have your educate, you have your establish, and then you have your product development. So, you're going to want to do your research. Maybe you got some funding. Maybe you saved up some funding. You're going to want to end up in a lab. You're going to either a laboratory to develop your chemical mixtures with somebody who understands how to actually do that. It might be you, it might not be. Or your device, which is much more at home. Your device, it's in essence a box that does something. So when you're prototyping, it doesn't have to be so sleek and sharp. It just has to be assembled and demonstrate that it can be assembled. And then from there, the product design people will come in later. So you have to be able to show your components. Understanding how to do technical drawings would be a big plus. Or understanding that you're going to need technical drawings to show to investors, to show to manufacturers. It's just part of a business plan in this field is your specifications, your technical specifications. If you're doing a service industry, your product development is more like developing your processes, the workflow of your staff, understanding who has what responsibilities. You're going to have, your location is obviously very important. You're going to want to get state licensing and all of this. So you're going to definitely want a good lawyer. I would say in anything where you're developing something new, any new business, getting a lawyer is a big deal. I know it's expensive for the young founder. and it's not necessarily your very first step, but about the time you're really going to want to start unveiling yourself to the world, the general public, you want to make sure you have a lawyer before you sign contracts, before you make any kind of commitment. Because even though the contract is read a certain way, just filing the contract in a way can affect the way that it is enforced. So, having a lawyer that understands that is, you can't put a price on good legal advice. So then beyond that, you want to market your product. So you've developed your device or you developed your medicine. You're probably going to want to, you could go, once you have your manufacturer, you're probably going to want to contact a distributor or something like this. I really don't recommend just manufacturing it and selling it directly to the public. There's going to be licensing considerations that could be extremely expensive. So once you get let's say a medicine first, once you have your medicine developed and somewhat tested, this is about the time you might want to start contacting a proper pharmaceuticals company who can buy it from you and then market it properly, just because you don't want to be alone with this, because it's health. I mean, if somebody dies on your watch, that's the end of your money. Whereas the pharmaceuticals company understands how to fight that. Unfortunately, you have to fight it because, you have to defend yourself. You didn't do this on purpose. And there are going to be people who have adverse side effects to your medicine. And it's like this with the devices, too. Suppose you put a pacemaker in somebody's chest and then it stops working for some reason. Well, you're going to be liable. The family's going to come after you and sue. So you come up with an idea for a medical device. You want to prototype it. And then probably you want to start contacting companies. It's just like being a rock star. You want to get signed by a record label, or if it's just like being a video game developer, you're not going to pay for all the development yourself. You're not going to develop it all alone in your bedroom unless you're truly skilled or unless it's a very simple game. You're going to want to develop your concept, document your concept, make some traction in terms of getting some market research and things like that, and then you're going to want to pitch it. It's going to be a business-to-business transaction because you're going to need a larger company, again, that has protections and understanding and distribution and everything, because your device might be obsolete if you do it yourself by the time you get it to market. So you're trying to prepare your presentation for big-time players. So it's a business-to-business. And then beyond that, you want to deliver your product. So if you're a medicine, you want to make sure that it's in pharmacies everywhere. This is where a big company can handle it. If you want to make a device, you want to make sure it's, of course, available on your own online store. If it's authorized by the FDA, then you're going to be able to sell it too. So you're going to, or unless you made an agreement otherwise, but you're going to want to make sure it's on store shelves. You're going to want to make sure it's available online. You're going to want to make sure doctors have understanding about how to use it. So you, as an evangelist for your brand, especially after it's been adopted by a larger company, can do a lot to help it work because you are the founder. And you can go out and meet face-to-face, and you can convey your sincerity in a way that a company never could. Okay, so finally, then there's deliver the product, like I said, which is pharmacy shelves or online, or if it's a service, you have your facility. And then I skipped marketing. So right before you deliver your product, you want to market it. So this would be up to the larger company that distributes it, of course. They would have the advertising budget, national budget. They would have an army of salespeople and professionals who are paid on commission to go out and promote your product. And probably in the end of the day, you'll end up getting a few percents on every sale. But if you're dealing with billions of dollars, that's money you're going to be more than happy to have. And then, so then you deliver your product, like I said, and that's, store shelves or the mail, or, they come into your facility, which is obviously the most expensive, is to have a facility and administer a service. That's because you have staff, and there's just all sorts of regulations as well. Going to need a good lawyer for that too. And then the final step is customer service. So you want to make sure that this is working. It continues to work. You don't, like, for instance, there's people who had a sling put in their, like, a stomach. It's like a mesh netting that holds their stomach in place after they've had a certain type of injury. Well, that causes tremendous irritation, and then they got to go in and take it out. Well, they're going to sue you for that money because you provided them with a device that didn't work as intended. Well, there's no way you can get around that to a certain extent, and it's always going to happen, and there will be lawsuits. You just have to prepare for that. This is another reason you want a major company behind you. They have vicious lawyers, and they have lobbyists in Washington, and the list goes on. But you want to make sure that it works. You want to make sure that customers are happy. You want to make sure that the doctors who are prescribing it are happy as well. In fact, they're probably more important because customers will do whatever doctors say. So the business-to-business transaction satisfaction is your primary goal. You want to make sure that doctors are happy and continue to prescribe your device or your medicine or refer you to facilities. I hope that serves to clarify a few things about the medical industry. I wish Elizabeth Holmes could watch my presentation and maybe she wouldn't, maybe she could have better success next time. I'm thinking of starting it myself. I would love to demonstrate the setup of such a project. In the next couple of weeks, we might include new sections. I want to do a walkthrough of a business for remote workforces coming up soon. And I just thank you for watching. I thank you for participating in my community. We're doing everything we can to improve our quality and your viewer satisfaction, and hopefully it's just something useful for you in your progression. If I can be part of that progression, it's the most fulfilling thing I can think of. So just thank you so much. I appreciate you. Have a great day.